Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Anthony Broom on Wednesday, June 18th, episode dropping June 19th, but we are coming to you a day early. So if any crazy news breaks in the middle of June, then and we don't talk about it, that is why. But I'm not expecting that to happen. We're going to talk some Michigan football, Michigan basketball starting their summer workouts this week. We are also going to discuss a little bit of football offensive line as well, get into that with the impact that Juan Castillo has had on this offensive line or is going to have in the future and continue to. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like the video. We got to get up to 200 likes here. So if you want Michigan to go undefeated 12-0 this year, make sure to hit that thumbs up. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel and head to the Wolverine.com. You can use the promo code UM1, that is UM and the numeral 1, right now for 2 months of access behind the paywall for just $1. So try us out. Get in over at the Wolverine.com. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment and you can answer this question. What is more likely to happen? Michigan football makes the college football playoff or Michigan basketball makes the Final Four this coming season? Answer that. Give your explanation in the YouTube comments, and a great poll, Chris, that you started over at our message board, the fort at the Wolverine.com, which again, people use that aforementioned promo code. They can get in with the premium subscription. What's more likely?
It was closer than I thought, right?
What's that?
It was closer than I thought, the vote. I
was going to say, so last I checked, there were 418 votes. 52.9% of people said the college football playoff is more likely. 47.1% said the Final Four. So damn near 50-50. It's really close. You can make an argument for either. I went with the college football playoff, but what did you two vote on this one? I thought it was a great question.
I voted Final Four, and I just think that, and I know that it's easier to make the playoff now, right, with the expanded 12 teams and everything else, but with the uncertainty around Sherrone Moore's status, and you've got a freshman quarterback. When's the last time a freshman quarterback won 10 or 11 games? You know, it's really tough to do, especially when you've got questions on the offensive line and you've got questions at wide receiver, maybe a little bit of a question mark at cornerback. We'll see how that plays out. But and this team, man, from what we've been hearing about how loaded this Michigan basketball team is and what's going on in these summer scrimmages, even without Morez Johnson, it's unbelievable how talented these guys are. Now, I understand everybody's like, you can get bounced in the first round or you can get bounced in the second weekend and so on and so forth. It's really hard to make a Final Four, and it really is. Last year, we saw, 3 number ones or 4 number ones, wasn't it? Make the Final Four. So, and I think Michigan's going to be up there, man. I think this team is extremely talented, extremely well coached. So I gave Michigan basketball the slight edge.
For me, it's football, only because a lot of it has to do with the math and the likelihood. In order to make a Final Four, even if you're a good team, a great team even, a lot of things have to go your way. And it kind of just boils down to if you're someone who thinks that this Michigan football team can unquestionably make the playoffs this year, or if you think they're a year away, or you think that they're an 8 or 9 win team instead, which is fine. Everyone's entitled to that opinion. I just think it's just a little easier for me to envision that. For as much as we think that the basketball team has Final Four potential, has national championship potential, it's a lot more likely that they get there, that Michigan football gets to the playoff, than I think you win 4 games in the NCAA tournament, because it's incredibly hard to do. Michigan was very good last year, won 2 games in the NCAA tournament, and you run into a buzzsaw, and all of a sudden your season's over. So that's where I'm at with it. I could see both things happening. There is no option C there, but I do think it is football of the two.
Yeah. And I guess to like Chris's argument would be Michigan is going to be that buzzsaw this year, right? And I think that is possible. And even when you are the buzzsaw, doesn't mean you get there. That math is a great. I'm terrible at it, but to use that word, I agree. That's why I went football too, Anthony. Just with the fact that like you can back into a college football playoff berth. Indiana kind of did it last season. You know, one of their toughest wins in the regular season was against Michigan, and It was a Michigan team that won 7 regular season games. Really, if they had any sort of offense, they would have won down in Bloomington. But, so you can back in. And, when I look at it, and Chris, you mentioned some of the question marks that Michigan has, they're all valid. But I look at the teams on Michigan's schedule. I don't see a team without a lot of similar, if not more, question marks too. There's a chance like the Oklahomas of the world, Nebraska, USC, Washington, those teams in that tier just aren't really at that CFP level. And Michigan's able to kind of go and win a couple of these tough road games, hold serve at home as well. You get Ohio State at home. That gives you an opportunity if you're in the mix late in the year. So that's why I went there. But it's a great question. And the fact that it is close, I think, speaks to the excitement around both programs right now. There aren't that many years recently where both are really good at the same time, even though like this is a Michigan, Florida, a couple others, you can have great success in both of those two main sports. But Michigan's had, John Beilein saved a lot of the tough football years. And then when things got a little bit more rough in the Juwan Howard era, you had the great football teams. There haven't been too many years where it's lined up with both having great seasons. So it would be really exciting to get both. And, it would mean for some fun, meaningful football and basketball for months and months here.
I think we're headed that direction for the next few years. And speaking to people close to the basketball program, basketball, I never worry about that. I got to be honest, the way that Dusty May has proven he can put together a roster, right? And I understand there's money involved, but he's a great recruiter too. So with football, it's a little bit tougher. But next year I was looking at the offensive line and the young guys that they have there. That needs to be a strength next year. That might be a question mark this year. I think it'll be a strength next year based on what we've heard from people involved. You got Bryce Underwood in year 2. I would imagine that they're going to get some more receivers and maybe a couple more from the portal. So to me, it all comes together next year. There's a lot of good young talent on that football team. So I think it is going to be a really good year this year for both sports. I think it's going to be an elite year for both sports next year, and then throw hockey in the mix. Man, it's kind of fun to think about what we've got to cover here coming up in the next several years.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. It's so often we do the swing on social media where it's football school, or now it's basketball school, and it hasn't been very often where it's gone hand in hand like that. So hopefully water finds its level and we get a nice little era of 2 contenders here, from August to April. That would be a lot of fun for us. So I think a more succinct way to put how I felt about football over basketball in the Final Four is that really it comes down to if Michigan might be 1 win away in terms of if you beat Ohio State, I think you're probably in the college football playoff. Michigan basketball, you got to get 4 wins to get to the Final Four. So to me, that's where the math goes.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was Joel Honigford said that we're an everything school and kind of coined that phrase a few years ago when Michigan set the record or whatever it was for Big Ten championships in a season. And, he was part of the early turnaround. That was before they won the national championship in football. But I guess football wasn't really the question. It was more like gymnastics. Teams like that were winning a lot of championships. So a lot of success probably coming in a lot of these different sports. Let's talk about Michigan football and new addition, Jake Garcia. But before we do, want to remind people to head to the WolverineOnDemand.com to order their 160-page Michigan football preview magazine. It's got Bryce Underwood on the cover. It will ship out by mid-July, and you'll get that in your hands. Read it on the beach. Read it wherever you want to read it. And, it's perfect for traveling, things like that this summer as you get prepared for the Michigan football season and educate yourself on the 2025 Wolverines. I always say get 3. Get 1 for yourself, 1 for a friend, 1 for the archives in case you lose one, in case you want to collect them. So go order 3 right now at the WolverineOnDemand.com. We talked about Jake Garcia on Monday's show, which we recorded a few hours before he ended up committing, but he is now not only committed, but also signed with the University of Michigan, East Carolina quarterback transfer, 6'3", 203 pounds, headed to his 4th school in 5 years, began his career for 2 seasons at Miami, then goes to Missouri for a year in 2023, spent last season at East Carolina. He's played in 15 games, started 7 of those, opened the first 6 games of East Carolina season last year before losing the job, completed 60.2% of his passes for 14 100 yards, just over that, 8 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. We talked about that on Monday. The turnovers were a big issue for him last season, but you add a guy who started games just like Mikey Keene has. Keene started a lot more, had more success, but someone with experience to give you a little bit more depth in this room, which is pretty young in terms of what the what this year looks like, with the majority of the snaps likely going to a true freshman. So I like the move, fellas, and especially in June, there aren't many options.
Still talking. It's crazy about a guy who's never going to play here. So, but he is an insurance policy, and everybody keeps asking me, "Oh, this must mean that Mikey Keene is hurt and he's not coming back," and so on and so forth. And I'm like, no, this is basically, in my opinion, the guy that's going to be your number 3, or maybe vie for number 2. But he's got some talent, but we all know that it's going to be Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene. I think Jake Garcia is an insurance policy. I don't think Jaden Davis is close to ready to play here, meaningful snaps, and you need 3 guys. I think that's really what it boils down to. So nice addition. And I did not read what the Bonesville writer said about him. Did he say he was like the best quarterback they've ever had, Clay, or what did he say?
He did not. He talked about the turnover struggles. He talked about trying to make the big play too much, things like that. But he said he's got a great personality. He was a really good leader for them, and was a positive guy to have in the room with some young players. So
the old great personality thing
in that regard.
The old great personality thing, just like the date that isn't very good looking on a blind date. So hey, it's okay. It's depth, and he's here. Good luck to you, Jake. It's nice to have you here in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, he was the personality hire like me at this place. So there's a role for guys like that.
That's true.
We talked about this the other day. He's not coming in to compete for the starting job. Is it within the range of outcomes that he's your QB2? Maybe. I think that's on the high range of outcomes, but even that's lofty, barring injury. At some point, it seems like they'll get Davis Warren back as well. So, you're looking at a guy right now who is probably he's in direct competition with Jaden Davis, potentially Davis Warren if he's back somewhat early in the season. And I wrote this the other day, anyone that's not named Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene, you can kind of put in that break in case of emergency category, where you hope it doesn't get to that point. You hope you don't get to a point where you're in a game on the road and your quarterback goes down and you have to bring in, no disrespect to the man, but you bring in whoever this roster's Russell Bellamy is, to be able to turn to a guy in a pinch that's been through a few battles, that started a few games, that was talented coming out of high school, or was highly recruited, I should say. It's, again, this offseason has been kind of defined by these shrewd floor-raising moves instead of these moves that really, put the pedal to the metal and accelerate a lot of these position groups forward. But, it's fine. Happy to have him here. Came together fast, and I think your quarterback room's better with him in it than with him not in it. So I think it just kind of boils down to that.
Yeah, not every move has to be, especially in mid-June. Like, why can't you just get better? And I think that's what they did here. And let's say Mikey Keene doesn't get healthy, and then it seems to be a guy that has a hell of a chance of playing. If you get one injury, or what do they say? You break a shoelace or something like that, right? If you're the number 2 guy, you got to be ready to go. They had to go to a guy in the portal and Alex Orji during the bowl game last year. And they had Jack Tuttle start a game and then retire. Like, there crazy things can happen. Everything goes according to plan when you map out the season and the off season. But I think insurance policy, as you put it, Chris, is a good way to put it. And sometimes you got to use your insurance policy. Sometimes you got to tap into that. So I don't hate the move. Anthony, are you saying he's as bad as Russell Bellamy, though?
No, I'm saying you add him to avoid that situation.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes complete sense. That does make sense. Because I was going to say, come on, put some respect on Jake Garcia's name, but also Bellamy, whatever. It's not a name.
And Russell, if you're listening, I'm so sorry, man, but you were in over your head in that game.
And you had a great personality.
Absolutely.
You were the personality hire.
Sure he did. Yeah. Did he, Chris?
He was a nice kid.
Love it.
There you go.
Is tough out in Lincoln, Nebraska. But So yeah, that's Jake Garcia. If you want to hear more about him as well, we talked about him on Monday, as we mentioned. Let's move on to Juan Castillo and the impact that he could have on Michigan's offensive line. Chris, you put a story up on the Wolverine.com a couple days ago with John Jansen's take on what he's seen and going back, some stories of playing against Juan Castillo's offensive lines when he was with the Eagles and John Jansen was with the Washington Redskins. You can say that because they were the Redskins at that point. But he also joined John Jansen on the In the Trenches podcast this week and just talked about a lot of the different offensive linemen in the room, what his role could be, what his coaching philosophy is, and it kind of gets you fired up. He's a old school coach, 65 years old with decades and decades of experience. But my main takeaway from the part of him just talking about what he's trying to get some of these guys to work on and how he's helping Grant Newsome is that he is going to have the role that we expected him to have, and it's pretty big. Talking about working together with Grant Newsome, that Grant can bounce things off of him, and he said he's bouncing things off of Grant and the other coaches too, because he says once you stop trying to be the best you can, you don't get any better. He said the work never stops trying to improve. So this is a guy who was at UCLA last year as their offensive line coach, decades in the NFL as well, and can bring that type of experience to a room that is coached by somebody, very talented and has a bright future, has about as little experience coaching offensive line as you can have. So I think that's a huge help.
Yeah, and what Jansen said was, he said, if I knew where he was going to be, and he was a free agent, he said I would have gone there based on what he had heard about him. That was extremely high praise. And John Jansen doesn't BS. When you talk to him on off the record, he said this was an absolutely huge hire for this program. This guy knows what he's doing. It was clear they needed some help last year. I thought the same thing with the wide receivers, right? Which is why you bring Soup Campbell back. And no offense to Ron Bellamy, but these are veterans who have been around a long time and have been proven to be some of the best at what they do. So Soup Campbell's receivers rooms here were unbelievable. Those guys got better, and it's the same thing with Juan Castillo wherever he's been. So Giovanni El-Hadi, Michigan's guard, said, man, no offense to anybody either, but I wish he'd been here since day one for me. The things that I can bounce off him, the way that he's helped me. So I think this is going to be great for the offensive line room. I think it's much needed. This is the group that I think we all have the biggest question marks about, right? When it comes to the offense, I know the receivers, they have some work to do as well, but the offensive line, if the offense goes as the offensive line goes. So I love having him here. Excited to hopefully we get to talk to him one-on-one a little bit. It's not very often that we get that with analysts, but I sure would like to sit down with him and feel out what makes him tick,
Just, I was an NFL guy long before I was really a hardcore college sports fan, or obviously in this field. And Juan Castillo's name was a guy that was he is one of the most well-respected guys in the profession, certainly in the NFL level. You almost feel like Michigan is like, what's the right way to put it? Not punching above its weight class here, but to have that guy here as an analyst is incredible. I mean, he's got a track record. Now, does that mean he's the shadow offensive line coach? No, he's here to be an asset, to be a guy who can bring Grant Newsome along and teach him the finer points and just be another voice in that room. And last year, I think they needed another veteran voice in that room because Sherrone Moore, obviously he's always going to have his fingerprints on the offensive line and what they do in the trenches. But when you're the head coach, you've got a lot more responsibility. So to have a guy here who can not only serve as a mentor to Newsome, but to some of the older guys, the Greg Crippins, the Gio El-Hadis of the world, a guy who's respected, has gravitas, has a track record of developing talent. That's incredibly, incredibly valuable. So that they were able to find a way to get him here is, again, just another really solid. I wouldn't even say a solid move. That's a home run by Sherrone Moore to have that guy working for you as an analyst. So glad to have him here.
And Juan was here in 2019 as an analyst, and that was a pretty good offensive line. Ed Warner was the offensive line coach. The rules were different. Analysts couldn't coach on the field, but they could still be involved behind the scenes, help the position coach, meet with the players, things like that, add their own insight. And he has a heck of a lot of it. So, that was a good line. That was, Runyon, Caesar, all those guys. And, you hope they can get at least back to that level this season and then some in the coming years, as you mentioned earlier in the pod, Chris. Like there's a lot of young talent on this offensive line. So if they can get to a much better place than they were last season this year to help out Bryce Underwood and the rest of the team and make sure they can keep that offense on the field more this season, then I think you would set a nice foundation for yourself for the future, knowing that you're going to inject a little bit more talent into the lineup there. Also, Castillo mentioned like just his philosophy on the center position. It was really interesting, saying usually it's the least athletic guy there. Usually it's a really smart player. And he said, like, no offense to any centers out there, but they're a little more cerebral. They're kind of nasty, but maybe don't have all the talent. He said, I like to get a guy like a tackle or a guard over there eventually. And then Chris, you wrote earlier in your article about how, in your opinion, Brady Norton could end up being a center down the line for Michigan. He's probably needed now more at other positions, but once they get more depth, some of those guys up to speed, that could be interesting. And Juan mentioned how it wasn't like that with Caesar. He was the more athletic type rather than the, I don't know, not to throw Drake Nugent under the bus, but like he's what comes to mind when I think of what he was describing with most centers.
Did Castillo mention Norton?
He did not.
It's interesting because some of the coaches that I talked to for the football preview, and you'll read it, actually did and said that's a guy that I could see ending up over there. So it'll be interesting, but because that's one position that if you look across the board, I see guards, I see future tackles, I see a lot of young guys that are going to be really good football players here if they're coached right. Who's the center? And, do you go to the portal? The two of them, the guys that, Oluwatimi and Nugent, who we talked about, were portal guys that came over and were the last piece, the missing piece to that elite line. So I could see them doing that again. Greg Crippen lost his job last year at the beginning of last year. So there are still question marks this year, but we have heard great things about him and the work that he's putting into it this offseason to improve. So I have faith that he's going to be solid there. So, but this is the big question mark again. I was really disappointed that they didn't go out and get a couple more pieces on the line. I know they were expensive, but if you're this close, guys, if you're this close, you know what, go out and you might as well finish it, right? If you're this close to finishing the puzzle. So we'll see how they do. And they said that they didn't think that there were guys out there that were better than some of the guys they have now. We'll see if that's true of an Evan Link, especially if he's playing tackle. I think you guys both believe he might start the season out at left tackle. I think it's a possibility. I think, as Jansen told me, he said, I think eventually Babalola is your best bet, even this year at left tackle. And then you move Link to guard where he can compete with Nathan Afobe. So, but there's some talent here. It'll be very interesting to see how it comes together. This is a big year for Grant Newsome. I'm not going to withhold and I'm not going to hold back and say, hey, everything was great last year. It was bad as late as the Oregon game when it shouldn't have been. And you could tell that Sherrone Moore was a little bit frustrated by that. So big year for those guys up front and lots of big talk. Let's see how they do this fall.
Yeah. And when Sherrone Moore did a press conference, I think on signing day, one of the things we asked him was, what is your biggest emphasis going into next year? And he said, we want to be more physical. And I think that was a direct kind of call out to the offensive line. So to get those guys play a little more cohesively, a little faster, a little more physical, that's going to be the key. And for a guy like Grant Newsome, the fact that you were able to throw some pretty good NIL together late in the cycle and land a Babalola, land a Ty Haywood, those are some moldable pieces where I think it's very important for offensive linemen to get good coaching right out of the box, because that's going to set you up for a push next year or in the future. And, so it's a big year for all of those guys. It's a big year for the guys that are likely going to start and fill this thing out. And it's a big year for that next generation as well.
For sure. It was a big week for Michigan basketball over at the PDC. They started them on Monday. Also hosting some of Dusty May's camps this week over there. This summer, they're allowed 8 hours per week, including 4 hours on the floor for 8 weeks. You can split them up, can take off weeks, but 8 total. Last year they split them up a decent amount. This year I think starting a little bit later, so maybe they'll go more weeks consecutively. But they released a 31-second video on about Monday night that got fans pretty excited about what they saw. And in action-packed 31 seconds, everything that was in there is the following: Yaxel Lendeborg one-handed dunk over Oscar Goodman, Will Cheddar reverse two-handed slam, Yaxel knocking down a step-back three from the left wing, Roddy Gale hitting a three, Trey McKinney coming off a screen, finding Yaxel Lendeborg for a layup, Will Cheddar making a left corner three, Trey McKinney driving the lane, finishing a layup over Oscar Goodman, much bigger defender. Winters Grady with a 6-spin move, creates some space over Roddy Gale, drills a three. Roddy Gale dunks. Oscar Goodman makes a three from the right corner. Will Cheddar bangs in a three from the left corner again. And then a team breakdown, 1, 2, 3 work, 4, 5, 6 together, led by Namari Burnett. All in 31 seconds. No missed shots. Tom Wyrod, our friend over at Michigan Basketball, they made sure to not put any missed shots in there, so they were perfect from the field. Yeah, no one missed a shot all day. Yeah,
no, exactly. They just had to pick from all the makes.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it was a good little video there, and seeing that this team, and you just watch that video, and a lot of guys, few of them aren't even there yet. Merez Johnson out in Colorado Springs with Team USA. LJ Kaysen was still with Team USA at that point, coming back to Ann Arbor now. And Adai Mara, Elliot Cadeau were not seen, but hell, they could be there by now. Who knows? There's still so much talent on this team that was taking the floor for the first time together.
Unbelievable. Look at these guys, and you can see by the smile on Dusty May's face. And, you know, you hate to say that, but he knows he's got a great team. And when I sat down with him about a month ago, this guy, you could just tell. He said, yeah, he couldn't talk about Yaxel Lendeborg, but there was that gleam in his eye that, okay, he knew something. And sure enough, Yaxel Lendeborg is here. This is, to me, a contender, guys, a national contender. There is a ton of talent on this team. Now, the challenge is figuring out which guys play best together and getting enough guys minutes here to keep everybody happy, which is a great problem to have, right? But to me, it is just a blast watching this thing come together. And they are so well coached. Dusty May is just an elite coach, in my opinion, elite recruiter. Again, it comes down to money a little bit too, but his personality, everything that we were told about him coming into his career here has been accurate. And what we have seen with the collection of talent on the floor, there are no rebuilds anymore when it comes to this stuff. And he said it right from the get-go. We want to compete this year. And then he goes out and wins a Big Ten tournament championship. So pretty exciting stuff, guys. And on that note, I got to go get my quiche out of the oven, so you guys are going to have to finish up without me.
This guy's got a spot on the Huge Show and a quiche in the oven.
And a quiche in the oven. Thanks,
Good
fellas.
luck. Shout out to our friends over at the Huge Show. We'll talk to you soon, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
I mean, you just describing that clip. Can I change my answer from earlier in the show? That maybe this is a Final Four team. That was what I needed to hear. I haven't seen this clip yet, so excited to check that out. But yeah, it's, you hear the talk of.
Did I just spoil it?
Did you spoil what?
I should have said spoiler alert. I didn't realize you didn't see it.
That's okay. Hey, you threw a lot at me. I can't remember even what you said. I just know they didn't miss a shot. You had guys dunking over each other. They look like the Harlem Globetrotters out there. F it. They're going undefeated next year. I mean, that's just what that clip tells me. But no, it's incredibly exciting. We've talked about it a few times at this point, where this roster to me is just kind of a, it's very much like what last year's was, but with a little more depth, and you got that physicality of those guys up front. Mm-hmm. You just got you have some optionality in the front court. I think, your wing guys, really, I think that's going to be what determines your ceiling, is how well you shoot the basketball. It's just it's so much fun, but apparently they figured that out, because they didn't miss a shot in that clip. So,
right. No, totally. A couple things from that is, it was a little unfair to start the video with Yaxel just posterizing Oscar Goodman. I mean, Oscar put in some work behind the scenes. He didn't deserve that.
You know what? I bet you Oscar Goodman's a paid actor in that one. He got a little extra NIL for the photo op.
I hope so. I hope so. And then the second thing is, and I'm glad you haven't seen it yet, because I'm excited for your reaction. You got to text me later when you watch it. Winters Grady, the spin move he does make that I described, I didn't do it justice because it was ridiculous. Hits a shot from three. So just seeing the different skill sets is fun. Obviously, it's a highlight reel, right? It doesn't mean a lot, but it's a way to talk about what this team has and the fact that they are underway here with summer workouts. And summer workouts are important in college basketball because it's not just those 8 hours we described, 4 of them, probably mostly with Matt Aldred and the strength staff, and then the other 4 on the court with the rest of the coaches. And, even the coaches are in and out doing different things, recruiting, things like that. So you're not going to have your full mix. But when you go back to last season and you talk about the 4-5 ball screen that kind of took over the Big Ten college basketball with Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, Dusty May talked about it and said that was something we experimented with in the summer. It was a little clunky, didn't quite work out. They circled back to it later on towards the fall, and it ends up working. So this is the time to learn each other, learn how to play with each other, alongside each other, build that camaraderie, figure out what works, what doesn't, what you may want to come back to later on. And so it pays dividends. I think, Dusty did an interview a couple of weeks ago with Brian Bush, and he mentioned that last year's summer workouts were a little too much. Guy hurt, guy out of town, sick. They had a bunch of guys out, not the whole team together really until the fall. Seems like that was something he wanted to have, more of the team together this summer, and it seems like they have that. So we'll see when Adai-Mara, Elliot Cadeau, they could be here now when they arrive. Merez Johnson, you hope for his sake he makes the cut here with Team USA. Sounds like he's likely going to, and then he'll be out a few weeks and head to Switzerland with the team if they do. But LJ Kaysen back, I think, is nice for them as well, to get all these guys playing together, because there are going to be a bunch of different lineup combinations.
Yeah, and you brought up the point I was going to make, in that some of the unorthodox stuff, like the Wolf and Golden pairing, that was right now, like something like that could be happening inside the practice facility as we speak, as we record this. The origins of something weird that gives them an advantage. And if there is something weird that gives them an advantage, Dusty May is going to find it, as he did last year. So it's exciting. Again, I think when you're able to have more of the team together, it expedites the team chemistry part of it. So when you do hit camp in the fall, there's not so much getting up to speed as much as it is honing in on where your guy's going to be and how to move the basketball. And, I'm sure this, talk about things that are established this time of year. I'm sure ball security is something that's being stressed a lot more than it was last season right now. So again, we might have to call it the Michigan Basketball Minute. We're going to do podcasts on this team all summer, and it might be in response to a 30-second clip on social media, but this team is going to be very good. And I'm excited that we get to, not just we, everyone is going to get to watch that.
That may be a promise. Anytime they release a clip like this, at least 31 seconds in length, then we'll break it down here. But
well, there might be some weeks on here where we need to go to break that down and take it 15, 20 minutes, because we are kind of entering the barren times here.
For sure. I'd love to see one of these workouts. Hopefully we can get in there at some point and watch. I was thinking of maybe like renting a kid and enrolling him in the Dusty May basketball camp this week so I could get a glimpse. But nevertheless,
I have nieces and nephews now, but they're not quite ready to dribble a basketball. So
okay. But they're hard at work there already. I'd imagine week off for the 4th, but when you do the math, and I hate doing this because it's our summer as well, there aren't that many weeks that they could have off. So I think they're going to go pretty hard here for 8 weeks, probably over the next 10 or 11, something like that. And then the school year starts and you're rolling with a few week break then, and you're into practice in late September, and you begin the season and have a tough schedule in early November after some exhibition games. So things will move quickly on the Michigan basketball side. Excited for that. Anything else, Anthony, before we get out of here?
No, get your order 3 Michigan football previews. Like, do that as soon as you can, because they're good. We've seen the page. When we talked Monday, we hadn't seen the page proofs yet. Yeah. We've seen the page proofs now. This looks pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. And it's as thorough and as comprehensive as anyone's. No one does as thorough and comprehensive a preview as we do. So incredibly excited for that to be out in the wild. And like I said, I got a trip coming up. I'll be out of the country for a few weeks, and I'm sure mine's going to be waiting for me, but I can't wait to I might have them send me one overseas. Is how excited I am to get my hands on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, the WolverineOnDemand.com is the spot to order the 160-page Michigan football preview magazine with Bryce Underwood on the cover. You can get it just for the cover alone, but there's a ton of info in there if you're a reader. And I know, the people watching a pod here on June 18th, you're probably pretty into Michigan football. You're going to want to get your hands on this thing. So appreciate everyone who's already ordered. Jump on if you haven't. Also, head to the Wolverine.com, get all of our coverage online using the promo code UM1 for 2 months of access for just $1. Like the video if you want Michigan to go 12-0 this season. Leave us a comment on the video. Do you think it's more likely the football team makes a college football playoff or the basketball team makes a run all the way to the Final Four? We'd love to read those comments. We'll interact with you in the comments. I think I hit everything there on all the plugs. Like, subscribe. The Wolverine.com is where you can find us. And we will see everyone next time.